Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event, The Network, today. If you are joining us online, just be aware we are at our location called the Sports Institute. It is our largest location in the Spooner family. It hosts both physical therapy, athletic training, and sports performance. And we're really excited because for the first time in our seminars, we have been able to host a in-person audience as well as a live virtual audience. So if you see our speakers looking around, that is what they are doing. My name is Becca Hibbert. I am the Director of Sports Medicine for Spooner Physical Therapy. And I am just so excited to have everybody here. I'm really excited about the topic that we are going to dive into today. I think it's something we could talk about for probably a week-long seminar, but we'll start here today. And then hopefully you guys have a lot of good questions and you learn at least one thing to take back into your professional and personal careers. Just to make you guys aware of some things that we have going on. So we have an event, this is more for our local individuals. We have an event on July 29th, which is a Thursday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. And that will be located here at the Sports Institute. And we have Milliken Sports Medicine coming in. They are going to do some taping techniques, mostly within their PowerFlex family of tapes. And then they're going to sit down with any athletic trainer that may be interested and talk about how they can help with their taping budgets, how they can hopefully save you all some money. So you'll hear more from me about that soon, but I'm really hoping to meet some of you on July 29th from 5 to 7 p.m. And then our next quarterly seminar is going to be September 18th, which is a Saturday at 10 a.m. And at that event, we're going to talk about advocating for yourself and for your profession. And then also we're going to have a sports nutritionist here to talk about working with your athletes when it comes to their nutrition. You know, often I'm asked, why do we do these events? Why does a physical therapy company host events that are aimed not just at physical therapists, but at athletic trainers, at physicians, at everybody within the sports medicine team? And for me, that answer is pretty simple. It comes down to this. Our athletes and patients, but I say athletes because I work in sports medicine, our athletes receive the best care possible when we work together as a team, when we understand, appreciate, and value what other people, what other professionals bring to our athlete and their care. That is how we best treat our athletes. And that's why today's seminar is something I'm very passionate about, because we talk all the time. I don't know about you, but as an athletic trainer, I've often been told, oh, build a network. What does that mean? Get a mentor. Okay, do I just find one? All of these things are great advice, but how do we do that? And how have people successfully done that throughout their careers? And what does it look like once a good network has been built? And that's kind of some of the things we're going to talk about today. Like I said, we could go on for a week about networking, why it's so important to work with other sports medicine professionals, but we're just going to start here today. Also, keep in mind that when we do network, when we do work with other professionals outside of just our own profession, we elevate ourselves. So selfishly, it's really important to get to know the other people, the athletic trainers, the physical therapists, the strength coaches, the physicians, because ultimately that's how we become the best professional in our own career as well. How today is going to go, each of our speakers will go about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about a 10-15 minute Q&A at the end. If you're joining us online live, you can go ahead and write questions into the comment section. And then obviously our live audience, by all means, feel free to ask questions as well. So without further ado, thank you for being here. And let me introduce our first speaker. Mike McKenney is an athletic trainer who is originally from Michigan, where he studied exercise science and athletic training at Albion College. After Albion, he moved to Phoenix for his graduate studies in sports healthcare at A.T. Still University. He has lived here in Phoenix as a licensed athletic trainer and strength and conditioning specialist for over 24 years. His clinical expertise includes rehab and sports performance training. He worked at the Fisher Institute, the location we're at right now, for 13 years prior to 2012, when he began his current position as the assistant professor and clinical education coordinator for the athletic training program at Grand Canyon University. In addition to his work at GCU, he is the owner of Summit Athletics, which is a provider of sports healthcare services. Some of his career highlights include providing sports healthcare at various sports events, including the Paralympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, the USA Cycling Olympic Trials, and Winter X Games. His professional goal is to have a lasting impact on the people he works with, which I think you're gonna get a good vibe for that today. And he hopes to challenge all those people he works with, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. So please welcome Mike McKenney.
Thank you, Rebecca. Wow. Thank you for that introduction. Just another brief segue into this is that coming here today is very humbling. It's one of the greatest honors that I've had in my professional speaking career because it feels like coming home. This is where I grew up. And the scary thing about that is the people who are here and know me, they know me. And much of what I learned has come from them. And so I give credit to God's grace in my life to introduce me to Brett Fisher in 1998, the influence he and everyone else here at this institute have been in my life. And I realized that much of what I learned while I was here is what God has used in me at the university over the last 9, now going on my 10th year. And so I'm very, very grateful for that and honored to be here. The topic that we're going to discuss today is a sports medicine network. I teach in a professional athletic training program where we introduce students in their very first class to the sports medicine team. The sports medicine team, however, is this phrase that is oftentimes considered an enigma because it's an umbrella term that encompasses a variety of different healthcare disciplines and specialties. And so many people have found it very difficult to even define what a sports medicine team is or what a sports medicine network is, primarily because it's so fluid and it doesn't simply encompass one specific type of healthcare discipline. In fact, Lemack and his colleagues in 2015 described the importance of having a team approach to athletic healthcare as including the ability to develop and implement health and safety policies, procedures related to prevention, management, and treatment of injuries and illnesses. The scope of athletic training consists of 5 different domains, and those domains seem to continually expand with each decade that goes on in our professional practice. And as such, that just produces a greater need for having a team-oriented approach towards delivering sports healthcare. This team-oriented approach is patient-centered. It's patient-centered. It's based on best available evidence, patients' beliefs, clinical expertise, and sometimes the resources or the internal and external influencers of those decisions. All of these should incorporate the core competencies or core principles that the National Athletic Trainers Association and others have adopted from the Institute of Medicine. In the early 2000s, the Institute of Medicine established 5 primary core competencies for the 21st century healthcare provider. Those include providing patient-centered care. Okay, that is incorporating the patient into the decisions, understanding their values and beliefs, and operating within a system that optimizes the efficiency and efficacy of their healthcare. It also incorporates working in a collaborative or interdisciplinary team. Now, this is in the early 2000s. The Institute of Medicine recognized that the 21st century healthcare professional is going to have to work in a collaborative team-oriented approach. Okay, and we'll discuss what that looks like today. Also, it's an expectation and a requirement now to employ evidence-based practice. And that incorporates not only the best available published science and research, but also the patient's values and beliefs, perhaps their history, and also your clinical expertise and experience. Another implied core competency is this concept of ongoing quality improvement. Oftentimes, healthcare systems refer to it as CQI, continuous quality improvement. And that is reflecting on your decisions, on your outcomes, and on your interactions with patients and your responses with other providers to continuously evolve and grow in your delivery of healthcare. And lastly, the last core competency is the utilization of informatics, the utilization of data and of information to drive future decisions. All of these are sort of founded in Kolb's model of experiential learning, where an individual has an experience, they then reflect on that experience, that reflection leads them to considering, how might this look in the future? How's this going to look for the next patient? How could this look for a patient with a different diagnosis or scenario, and yet come to similar conclusions? Then when faced with those opportunities in the future, then they can implement those thoughts and ideas, okay? So that is why I have this particular image up here. This is a Japanese proverb which says, a single arrow is easily broken, but not 10 in a bundle, okay? There's a biblical proverb stating that there's great benefit in wise counsel. There's a benefit of 2 being stronger than 1, for if one man falls down, the other is there to pick him up. A braided cord of 3 is not easily broken. And in terms of defining a sports medicine team, Rebecca had a great segue to understand that it is elevating patient-centered care by collaborating with other providers of other disciplines to deliver the most efficient and optimized care possible, okay? It can't be done alone. I'll tell you a brief story. It's probably close to 20 years ago. The guy whose name is on this building sat me down one day and said, hey, this thing's starting to grow, it's getting bigger, and I want you to know that there is no way that I intend to or ever could do all that's going to be required of this place. And so I will do whatever it takes to build you up, to educate you, to strengthen you, to send you to courses, and all of the other individuals here, for a collaborative approach to put as many arrows in the quiver as possible, so that as the needs arise, then there are suited individuals to be able to carry out that interdisciplinary approach within these walls and outside. Now that we've discussed what is a sports medicine team and what can one look like, I'd like to discuss the value of a competent sports medicine network. Vince Lombardi states that individual commitment to a group effort, yeah, that makes a team work, a company work, a society work, and a civilization work. I want to highlight this group effort and the value that a group effort can contribute to patient-centered care, evidence-based practice, collaboration, etc. Well, first and foremost, it's better healthcare, okay? It is better healthcare. Consider this. A dear friend of mine who's the director of sports medicine down at the University of Arizona has stated that he believes an athletic trainer is the original HMO, the original managed care system. That individual has that first point of access with a patient that serves as the initial evaluator, the gatekeeper to help that individual access the healthcare system in an efficient and an effective manner, okay? By operating efficiently and effectively and understanding the sports medicine team and having a sports medicine network, you can not only help patients recover quicker, get access to care quicker, you can save people time and money, okay? The healthcare system is a very, very, very broad system that has a number of numerous barriers, sometimes inconsistencies, and it's very difficult for the average consumer to learn to navigate, okay? When it comes to insurance restrictions, do you need a primary care to sign off on a referral to a specialist? What's it take to get direct access to a physical therapist or not, et cetera, et cetera. Well, developing a sports medicine network or team as a healthcare professional allows you to serve patients' interests in a manner in which improves not only the quality of their healthcare by recognizing or recommending competent providers, but also it saves people time and money. Would any of you guys be interested in saving time and money if you had a need? Yes. Consider your car breaks down. Okay. What's one of the first things that we do? Say, hey, Chip, man, do you know anybody, like, this is going on with my car? Do you got anybody you recommend? Everybody, and you always want to find someone who says, yeah, I got a guy. That's what the athletic trainer, physical therapist, healthcare provider who develops a network can be. You can be that individual who's got a guy, and guy is a gender neutral term. It refers to people or humanity in general, not just specifically males. Yeah, you get it. Okay. Patient-centered care. I want to point out the fact that research has shown that patient-centered interactions provide adherence to rehabilitation, adherence to medical care. It also leads to improved health outcomes. The fundamental characteristics of patient-centered care were identified as patient involvement in their care, that is giving an individual the option of different providers that they may see. And you'll see that that's a value of this. Also, the individualization of patient care, finding the specific provider that would be of most benefit to this specific individual. And effective patient-centered care practices are related to communication, shared decision-making, and patient education. Okay, all things that are incorporated in the value of a sports medicine network. Okay, value in the sports medicine network. Another value of the sports medicine network, in addition to better healthcare, which is patient-centered care, aligning with Institute of Medicine's primary competency, is continuing education through collaboration. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I have learned so much from the people that I have worked alongside within and outside of these walls. And that collaborative network is what the Bible refers to as iron sharpening iron. Okay. When you network and collaborate with other individuals, it elevates yourself, your practice, your knowledge, your experience, and then your value in turn to the future clients that you're going to serve. I would say that it also provides a competitive advantage. If you work in sport, if you work in athletics, okay, your team, your organization, or the individual will be most positioned for success when they are healthy. You guys agree? A healthy horse is the best horse to have in the race, okay? And whether we realize this or not as a profession, athletic training in large part originated from the desire for a competitive advantage. Okay, we think about keeping our athletes healthy and providing quality care, and all those things are very admirable. But ultimately, as an athletic trainer, I want to win. I want to win. When I have the privilege of traveling around the globe these days with Team USA Cycling, and when you got 8 people lining up in the gate fighting for one thing and only one person gets it, you better believe my heart is pounding for red, white, and blue. And I want to do everything I can to help that team have the best competitive advantage to get on that podium. And so let's be honest, having a sports medicine network can serve your team and serve your own professional interests by providing a competitive advantage. It also can improve and enhance the athlete experience. Okay, developing a sports medicine network can enhance the athlete's experience. For example, I want some of you guys in this room that have worked per diem events. Okay, maybe you've worked a camp, you've worked a tournament, something along those lines as a sports healthcare provider, and an athlete gets injured. Okay. When that athlete gets injured, their experience can be dictated by the care that they provide. So as a sports healthcare provider, one of the values that I try to provide is the athletic experience. Okay, if an individual gets injured during competition while at some type of event that I'm working, what I want to do is I want to provide the highest level of care that's patient-centered, that incorporates their decisions, that makes them feel valued, and perhaps at all costs get back out to competing rather than just removing them from competition. Okay, so that they have the greatest athletic experience. Because if they do, if they have a great athletic experience, they're more likely to go to that next competition, to go to that next race, to go to that next baseball tournament or whatever that is. That's one of our goals and objectives in working the X Games with action sport athletes. Most of them never ever have a healthcare provider on site. I work particularly now in the moto division where people are sending motorcycles upwards of 50 feet in the air. And when they crash out in the dirt lot in California, there's usually not someone around. So they're very, very prone towards self-care because that's just what they know. That's what makes them. One of our goals and objectives there is to provide collaborative care amongst all the providers to enhance their experience, because if they come, and even if they're injured, they have a great experience with those individuals caring for them, they're more likely to come back to those events. And when you have the best competitors coming back to those events, it breeds excellence in the event, okay? So that is a value of a sports medicine team or sports medicine network approach towards healthcare. From an educational setting, One of my colleagues who's been building high school sports medicine programs for over 20 years here in the Valley said one of the greatest values of a sports medicine team is it keeps butts in the seats, okay? It helps keep butts in the seats. That is because when athletes are evaluated, given information, and able to help navigate the healthcare system efficiently and effectively, then it's more likely that they're not going to miss school to go to a doctor's appointment, because the athletic trainer can help facilitate that doctor's appointment perhaps after school, or expedite that, or understand 504 plans or educational eligible experiences, and really focus on the return to learn as much as the return to play, and collaborating with other professionals around the Valley, again, in terms of efficient and effective healthcare that's patient-centered, that's collaborative, and that's evidence-based, okay? And then lastly, I think that the value of having a sports medicine network is tremendous marketing, okay? Tremendous marketing. When you recognize your limitations, when you recognize your skill set, and as my friend Chip would say, stay in your lane, then individuals feel very well cared for to know, hey, he has my, or she has my best interests in mind because they want me to see the best person for this, okay? Rather than just trying to do it all themselves. It requires a level of humility, okay? And as healthcare providers, being a willing learner and taking a humble approach towards patient-centered care by developing a sports medicine network and using it is tremendous marketing, because not only do you gain the respect of the clients who then might recommend more and more people to you, but also from the other providers, okay? The physician partners that you work with, the therapy partners that you work with, the massage therapists, so on and so forth, okay? Those are some of the different values of that group effort, sports medicine team. Okay. The last topic in the network that I'd like to cover is strategies for building and establishing your network or your sports medicine team. Okay. Many of you here may have already begun this endeavor to start to build your team. I want to start with the first and foremost thing is that your team is probably never complete, okay? As healthcare continues to evolve, as the needs of individuals continue to evolve, as technology, services, procedures, et cetera, continue to evolve, so does your sports medicine team. Here's a good example. 20 years ago, I graduated from one of the best graduate schools in the country. In fact, sometimes I wonder, how did I ever even get let in those doors? And at that time, what we knew about concussions is about 1/100th of what I know now. Back then, we were never encouraged to have a neurologist, a sports medicine trained concussion expert as part of your sports medicine team, a neuropsychologist, a vestibular therapist, so many individuals that are necessary and a standard of care today. That was not the case 20 years ago. So when thinking about how to build and sustain your sports medicine team, recognize that it will never be a work that is completed. It needs to continually evolve and expand as knowledge grows, as our disciplines and skill sets grow in regards to sports healthcare. With that approach and with that philosophy, your first step is to identify your needs in your patient population. They're different everywhere. My needs for a sports medicine network when I worked here at the Fisher Institute were different than they are now. I work at a university, and I also own my own sports healthcare business. Part of that business operates here locally in Arizona with youth sports. I volunteer and manage all of the student athletes at my kids' high school, but I also travel nationally and internationally. And so I've been a part of a lot of different networks and sports medicine teams, but the needs can change based off of your specific demographic, your location, so on and so forth. Have any of you thought of having a translator as part of your sports medicine team? You will when you travel overseas. You will. There's a need when you collaborate with those other emergency room physicians that are running the triage center at the World Championships. You better make sure that you have a translator there, or that they do as part of your sports medicine team to meet your needs. The second step, once you've identified and developed your needs, You may want to develop and recognize an organizational structure and chain of command. The National Federation of High School Sports, the NATA, has position statements also on secondary schools and college university settings for organizational charts and chain of command in sports medicine teams. But then developing and maintaining relationships through ongoing communication. It's not enough to establish a relationship, say, with a team physician as an athletic trainer, but that communication needs to be ongoing, open, and there need to be well-established guidelines for accessibility of one another. Okay? These relationships can be both personal and professional. Okay? This isn't something that you'll find in a textbook, but I found it to be very, very beneficial to have lunch with the sports healthcare providers that I work alongside. Okay? To sometimes play golf if that's something they enjoy. Okay? To talk about other topics than just sports, to talk about family, to talk about passions, activities, hobbies. Again, developing a relationship with an individual that's built both personally and professionally in order to foster and enhance that line of communication that then again is driven back towards patient-centered care, collaborative team approach, and evidence-based practice. Developing and maintaining these relationships can also include sharing information, okay? As athletic trainers and physical therapists, ask yourself, when's the last time I saw a really great study that maybe challenged my previous assumptions and beliefs about something, and then shared that with a physician that I work with to say, hey, would you read this? Can we talk about this? Because this is really challenging to me. And I'd like to know your thoughts on this. Or, hey, have you considered this? Okay. When's the last time you got a note from a doctor about, say, a plan of care that you would like to challenge? Maybe someone had some type of injury and the doc wants them resting for 4 weeks, and you're thinking, you know what, the evidence really suggests that this person might benefit from just some activation, not strengthening, but we're talking about movement and activation. Physicians are great. They're great partners, right? And they're part of this sports medicine network. They're not necessarily rehabilitation experts always. And so oftentimes I think that they appreciate and respect when you can share information with them, again, fortifying and just promoting that ongoing communication and professional relationship that you have with them and other providers. Anybody here a physical therapist? Maybe some online? Okay. My best friend from graduate school is a physical therapist. Where I went to school, we didn't really know any difference because athletic trainers, physical therapists, OTs, and PAs, we all went to class together. My rehab was taught by PTs, my gen med was taught by PAs. I was in class with all of them, and we were all friends. My very close friend owns his own physical therapy practice in Santa Cruz, and when he was starting that practice, he was committed to establishing relationships and developing a network. So what he did was every time he wrote progress notes for patients, he went and hand-delivered them to the docs during their lunch periods. He hand-delivered progress notes for the first few years of his practice to continue to enhance and just establish great relationships. Not just so that physicians would refer patients to him, but so that he would have someone to get to know and to understand that he might then reciprocate to. He's got a friend from church who has this injury surfing. Oh, hey, I got a guy. I can send you there. So it formulates and enhances that reciprocal nature through ongoing communication. Other things that you can do to develop and maintain relationships and ongoing communication is an invite other healthcare disciplines to the table to review protocols and participate in change, okay? To review protocols and contribute to the benefit of change, okay? Right. First and foremost, approaching the sports medicine network with humility and a willingness to grow and adapt. Number two, develop and maintaining relationships through ongoing communication. Number three, when necessary, delegate out or refer, okay? Stay in your lane. Recognize what your particular skill set is. And when you encounter a patient that exceeds the level of care in which you think is best or most appropriate for them, then identify the best provider to then refer and direct that individual for care. Don't try to do everything yourself. as an athletic trainer that was actually trained in the internship route pre-2004, that was really our mantra and calling card. We felt that our value was established in our ability to be a jack of all trades and to try to do it all. Okay. And what I've learned over the years and how our profession has evolved is that no longer do we need to be the expert at everything, but we need to recognize experts in everything so that we can be that gatekeeper to, again, drive the most efficient, effective care that saves people time and money. When you do refer out, here's a little, I guess, a clinical pearl. I was discussing this with a dear friend of mine, Randy Cohen. He's the director of sports medicine at the University of Arizona. He said, when you refer a patient, give that provider as much information as possible to make their job easy, okay? If you are referring a patient to Dr. Cardenas for a neurocognitive evaluation, then give him as much information as you can to make his job easy, so he knows what's coming in the door. And that can come in a lot of different ways. Perhaps it would be sharing a little bit of the patient's medical history. If it's a substantial mechanism of injury that was, say, like they were in a motor vehicle accident, not just in a sports-related injury. If they've got a parent or a provider that perhaps has a specific expectation in going to see him, make sure that he's aware of that. Again, when you refer people to other individuals in your sports medicine network that you've developed and you're maintaining relationships with, do everything you can to make their job easy. Give them a quick call, send them a quick text, whatever communication method you've established, make their job easy by providing information ahead of time. Okay. And lastly, the last strategy for building and establishing an effective sports medicine network is to be open to other professionals' opinions and your patient's beliefs. Listen to your patient, identify and prioritize their needs, not based off of solely your objective examination, but listening. In the book of James, the author writes, "Be quick to listen and slow to speak." Notice it's not the other way around. And word order matters. Be quick to listen. My wife often reminds me that God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that was for a purpose. Listening to your patient, understanding what their specific needs are, determining is that within your particular skill set or not, and if and when necessary, identifying the individuals in your sports medicine network that might be the best and most capable and competent individual to help meet that need, rather than implying your own needs on the patient solely through your objective examination and your own experience. So again, just to summarize, strategies for building and establishing a sports medicine team begins with humility and an openness to listening to your patients, to recognizing other different providers' beliefs and skill sets about something, developing relationships with a variety of different individuals of different skill sets so that your patients can have accessibility, okay? And in doing that, I would suggest that it could be very, very beneficial to have multiple providers in the same area of expertise. Now you might be thinking, well, you know, if I refer everyone to this individual for shoulders, and they're really great, why would I do that? Well, there's a lot of great physicians in Phoenix. I've been all around, and there's a lot of great physicians in a lot of places. I think that we are especially blessed. The individual that's going to be presenting after me is just one example of how blessed we are in this state to have incredibly competent and leaders in their specific disciplines as healthcare providers that are even accessible to individuals of all socioeconomic statuses, all athletic and competitive abilities. There is great access here. But sometimes third parties dictate access, okay? And so having multiple providers, again, enhances the efficacy and the efficiency of your sports medicine network. Because what if that provider that you lean on so often, what if they're on vacation? Then wish them well and ask them to not even think about work when they're there, and have plan B. in line for your athletes, okay? What if you have a kid who comes from California? This is what I'm faced with a lot at the university. They come from California, they have Kaiser insurance, and the only thing they can do here is go to an ER. It can be very frustrating. Again, having plan B. So having multiple providers within the same area of expertise can help with accessibility. It can offer a patient a second opinion. It can offer a patient a different avenue as well, or a different provider. Maybe your team physician at Mountain Point High School is great, but yet one of your student athletes has had sort of a difficult time with them because they really wanted to play and the team physician said they couldn't. And now they don't want to go back to that team physician. It's your responsibility in providing patient-centered care to give them a choice and to have an equally competent option available for them. Okay. So, in summary, I guess what I'd like to ask of each of you is to just consider what's one simple change I'm going to consider for providing value and accessibility in my sports medicine network to serve those individuals that God's brought into my sphere of influence. Okay, what's one simple change that you're going to add to your professional practice today? Okay, and so this is how I start with questions. Anyone here like to share what's one simple change that you're willing to commit to today to enhance your sports medicine team or network? I will call on you, Daria. What's one thing?
I think communication with the provider. Following up a little bit.
Yeah. Interactions that are not simply responsive to problems are oftentimes very, very healthy and beneficial. Rather than every time you call your doctor, some kid's got a problem, some family's got a problem, you've got something you need help with, having some type of interaction that's not always reactionary or responsive to a problem can be very healthy and beneficial for relationships. Okay. Anyone else? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Schedules are busy and crazy, but in person interaction can't be something.
Yeah.
So I think that was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, Chip. Yeah. And that goes a long way to, again, create the accessibility of two-way communication. When you develop your sports medicine network, one of your responsibilities will be to communicate back to your patients or the stakeholders on that sports medicine team, maybe parents, coaches, et cetera. You need to be able to get the information from the other providers and then filter it back to the coach so that the coach can understand, okay, here's my go, no-go status, or here's what the accommodations need to be for practice, okay, based off of that information that you get from other providers. So that communication is really important. Anyone else? One thing that you want to change? All right, well, thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We are going to move on with our next presenter now. Is that correct, Becca? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next presenter. Dr. Cardenas, if you'd like to come up and get your computer set up. Yep. Do that while I introduce you. Javier Cárdenas is a neurologist and the director of the Barrow Concussion and Brain Injury Center here in Phoenix. He's a board certified in neurology by the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. His expertise involves concussion, post-concussion syndrome, spinal trauma, and traumatic brain injury. He's a member of the Academy of Neurology, the National Football League Head, Neck, and Spine Committee, and the Arizona Governor's Advisory Council on Spinal and Head Injuries. He received his medical degree from the University of Arizona College of Medicine, completed his residency at St. Joe Hospital and Medical Center, and trained in child neurology at Barrow Neurological Institute. He created the Barrow Concussion and Brain Injury Center, which is the nation's most comprehensive concussion prevention, treatment, and education program. He has also created Barrow Brain Book, which Arizona high school students must complete to participate in school sports. It is the first mandated online concussion education and testing tool for student athletes in the country. I'd like to add also that Dr. Cardenas has been a very, very strong and wonderful advocate for the profession of athletic training. For my entirety here in Arizona, he has spent countless hours volunteering on the SMAC committee and helping to ensure the safety and the quality of athletic participation within this state. And Dr. Cardenas, if I haven't told you in a while, we are so grateful for your partnership with us. And so without further ado, let's get him up here to present.
So networking, in terms of networking, of course, we have different ideas and thoughts about networking, whether it's meeting people, or looking virtually like the last year. Of course, there are virtual networks within our homes and a technical infrastructure for networking. But let's also think about what our brains do and how our brains are networked. Now, we are all taught in school about the anatomy of the brain and the specific lobes of the brain, but I encourage you to actually not so much think about the brain, especially when it comes to injury and especially about concussion, as an area focused on certain parts of the brain. But in fact, it is highly networked. So this is just one example. The visual system is a complex network of function. So it's not just one area, not just the eye, the optic nerve, the optic radiations, the occipital lobes, the brain stem involved in eye movements and coordination. All of these things are networked. So when an athlete or a parent asks you what part of my brain was injured when I sustained a concussion, the answer is yes, okay? All of it to some degree because of the network that is going, or the networking that is going on. So once again, illustrating what this looks like in the field.
This route here coming back out, but as he came out, caught the ball, a little disoriented, turned around, looped back around, and never saw Malcolm Jenkins. That definitely was a little helmet to helmet on that hit. That closest to give you some perspective was Randy.
Now there's additional networking going on. Of course, there's the athlete, there's the team physician, there's the unaffiliated neurotrauma consultant who is there to assist in the evaluation. And so this happens, of course, as the brain's network is impacted. So once again, an illustration of neurons, axons, cell bodies, and then an impact and then dysfunction of the brain and those networks. In addition, we have, of course, the concussion protocol, which all are familiar with, and different versions of it at the professional level, the college level, and of course at the high school level. Who can trigger that? Once again, we have a network of people who are involved in this process. A teammate, a coach, an official, the spotters in the booth, right, Mike? We've got unaffiliated neurotrauma consultants on the ground, other healthcare providers on the ground, a network of people who are there looking out for the athlete day in, day out, and on game day. In this particular network on the bench, of course, this now happens in a tent, but we have the team physician, we have obviously the athlete, we have the neurotrauma consultant, and in this case, a neuropsychologist, which as Mike had alluded to, in our state, this guy has been on the sidelines for 16 years, which is unusual for anyone. And so what of the consequences of this? Well, these are once again interrelated in terms of the deficits that happen after a traumatic brain injury, after a concussion, physical, behavioral, and cognitive. And of course, at our institution, we've attempted to address those issues in a patient-centered, comprehensive way in order to make sure that we do what is best for the patient. Many of you are familiar with silos. Even within our own institution, we had silos of specialties that did their own thing, even for the same disorder or the same condition. but really breaking those down so that we can provide this patient-centered care. Myself, another colleague, Dr. Zeman, a psychiatrist, which I have to tell you is a godsend for our patients who suffer emotional changes, a social worker, a Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona, and a neuropsychologist by the name of Will Schultz. So Will is actually the new person who you saw in the field earlier. He's actually taken over Dan Blackwood's role. He also provides this service for the Coyotes. So why did we choose something like this model, a multidisciplinary model, a networked model? Well, there are many examples. This one specifically is for TIAs, transient ischemic attacks. These can be indicators of a stroke without a structural change on neuroimaging, but obviously can lead to stroke. So in this particular multidisciplinary clinic, they created a program in which you had individuals who had shorter lengths of stay because they had a fast pathway out of the ER, out of the hospital in order to help. Multiple sclerosis, and once again, a multidisciplinary clinic, keeping the patients out of the hospital altogether. Home treatment for their flare-ups, whether it was with methylprednisolone or others. And then, of course, even with ALS, a devastating disease, that can lead to an early death, extending life by several months in order for that to address the care of those individuals. And then, of course, when it comes to concussion, the multidisciplinary model associated with shorter recoveries, including things like rehabilitation. And what does that look like? All of you are familiar, all of you are part of some aspects of this. Physical for many times the vestibular component of concussion, occupational for the visual component, speech for the cognitive component. Clearly, I'm oversimplifying that. There are many other components, but those tend to be the primary elements that they are addressing. And once again, it is a network of individuals who come together as one unit who will do the interview with the athlete in this case, and then provide an individualized process and plan of care addressing those three areas. But these networks extend beyond the clinical care, but also to policy. And at the Arizona Interscholastic Association, there's a Sport Medicine Advisory Committee made up of healthcare professionals, including physicians, and they can be neurologists like myself, orthopedic physicians, sports medicine physicians. We have chiropractors as part of the group, naturopaths as part of the group, athletic trainers, physical therapists who also can be represented by multiple institutions, okay? Very ecumenical, very deliberate about how we approach our community, as well as from our major sports organizations and universities. So many. Now, this network in your state has had a national influence on many other programs, on many other bodies. And this is one example in which we had an issue with helmets coming off of individuals. One of our members said, hey, we need to institute a rule to find out, is this a behavioral issue or is this an equipment issue? And in doing so, we risked membership to the National Federation of High Schools. But in presenting our data, the National Federation actually adopted Arizona's rule regarding helmet dislodgement, as did the NCAA, which if you saw those first year comments, it was not very popular, but nonetheless focused on safety. That wasn't the only area in which we collectively, and I mean that in all sincerity, we collectively have had an influence on our nation. This is an example of practice injuries in football versus other sports, a high degree of injury. So definitely a change was coming. So this is the practice rule from 2013 here in your state of Arizona, looking at preseason, no more than half of the practice time, and regular season, no more than a third of the practice time. And of course, we had to define this for our coaches. Okay, they're touching each other and they're in pads. That's it. Don't try to finagle anything. And once again, this was adopted by the National Federation of High Schools for all of the membership across the country. The Zachary Lystedt Law you are all familiar with, a 2009 law named after a young man who suffered multiple concussions in a game, who resulted in neurosurgical intervention, paralyzed, as you can see, in the wheelchair. This was the model legislation in Washington. Fortunately, because of our networks, we were able to reach out to our colleagues in Washington and said, if you had to do it again, what would you do? What would you change? And they said, define the qualified healthcare professional. I'll tell you why in just a moment. So every state now has this legislation. Ours was in 2011. This is the importance of networking, because these laws started to come out before they even considered the stakeholders. And in this particular one, we had already had a law or a policy at the Interscholastic Association that had been in place for over a year. Yet we had two bills that were trying to define this. One was from Ben Arredondo, another one was from Nancy Bartow. You heard earlier from Mike about knowing where your lane is and where other people's lanes are. So I want to draw your attention to the committees, Government, Higher Education, Innovation, and Reform versus Education, being the vice chair, Health, Public Safety. She is the biggest individual who had the greatest amount of influence on this type of legislation. So keep those things in mind as you know your stakeholders, and then of course having a discussion which included the Interscholastic Association, families, parents, and then of course the legislation and policy that comes out of it. So this is once again modeled on Arizona's policy from the Medical Advisory Committee. And then of course it was signed into law. I'm going to draw your attention to just a couple things. So this is 15341 for those of you who want to look it up, talking about education for youth, education for parents, education for coaches, and that qualified healthcare professional. That qualified healthcare professional includes an MD or a DO, a PA or an MP, and you as athletic trainers. You are a qualified healthcare professional when it comes to removing, which anybody can do, but also return, which you are specifically called out as someone who can do that. But then there's also bad legislation. So a few years ago, when we were looking at issues, deregulation for your licensure came up, draft legislation, because the governor was sweeping all of these, what he thought was unnecessary licensure for many professions. Here were the stakeholders, the AZATA, AIA, school boards. Here's a draft of the bill. Fortunately, we came together, we called upon each other, all of those members, and said, hey, this is not a good idea. And here's why. Specifically, Mike also said, help the people that you're referring to. The same is true for your policymakers. If they ask you what we need to do and you say, well, I just don't like it, that's not helpful. Here's why we oppose it. Specific points about athletic trainers working under the direction of MDs and DOs, 65,000 high school athletes and thousands of college athletes, the professional programs that help to train individuals in the state of Arizona, addressing the issues that you guys are all responsible for, catastrophic injury, concussion, sudden cardiac arrest, heat illness. So this, I think, is a quite an attractive gaggle of individuals, of stakeholders. You can call out actually a number of, once again, those professional athletic trainers, those who are in the community, such as myself as healthcare providers, legislators, policymakers, teachers, school board members, head of the athletic trainer or the AIA. So what do you do beyond the legislation? Because of course there are also very important aspects that you want to address, and specifically how do we do so? And that, of course, includes education that the athletes receive. So this particular network is something that we created, the Barrow Concussion Network. That includes education, baseline and post-injury testing, so that should an athlete sustain an injury, we can evaluate them and get that information, that critical information from you as athletic trainers, and engage in a telemedicine consultation. Of course, this was well before COVID. Just a preview of that education, if you haven't already seen it, is Barrow Brain Book, which, by the way, will be in Spanish very soon.
Welcome to the Barrow Concussion Network, also known as BCN, your leader for all things concussion. My name is Izzy, and this is my co-host, Anthony.
You don't need to hear from this guy, he talks too much. All right, so once again, a network of partners, the Interscholastic Association, the Cardinals, ASU, my institution, of course, working together has a greater impact, and we've impacted over 1,000, or over 1 million athletes have undergone education. And then impact, of course, I want to be careful with my language. The tool, over 250,000 have utilized this tool because we provide it for all of our high school athletes. And then, of course, the telemedicine aspect of this, which we can be on the sidelines to assist you as athletic trainers in an evaluation should you need it. Now, what happens when we assess what we do? Well, we did over a 3-year period. We did an assessment and looking at about 350 consultations, the response time that we provided. And you would think that there would be a difference in what we were doing. And it turns out when we look at you as stakeholders, the biggest thing that you needed help with, of course, is a return to play recommendation. It's really cool to show the sideline video to whether it be donors or other people that we're doing this for. But you guys are good at that. You guys know when it is time to pull an athlete. What's always more challenging is that return to play. What does that look like? Well, the good thing, of course, is that this also is a cost-saving measure for our community. And in that period of time, which of course we've well exceeded now by the same amount of time, we've saved over $2 million for our community. And this is our network team, which of course includes Lauren Walsh as part of this crew, actually holding all the pieces together. Now I want to highlight one last thing, and that is the Athletic Trainer Initiative. This is an important initiative that once again was collaborative. These are our network of collaborators, including the Cardinals, AT Still, AZATA, and we decided that we needed to make sure that we would love an athletic trainer at every single high school that has athletics, okay? How do we achieve that? Well, you can mandate it. Of course, school boards and associations say, well, there's a cost associated with that. They are a stakeholder. We could say, all right, well, let's start somewhere. And we did. We said, let's look at postseason to make sure that there's an athletic trainer available for every postseason game. And we were able to do that. So you may or may not have seen, and of course, this year was a very different year, but a call go out to athletic trainers so that a school who is hosting a postseason game must have an athletic trainer for those postseason games. If they do not, then the AIA will provide one. And of course, we collectively, the parties that I just showed you, will pay for that. How much success is there? Well, these numbers haven't been updated from this last year, but over 90,000 athletes over the period of time that we've had it so far. 242 certified athletic trainers have participated in the program, and the cost has been relatively minimal at just under $200,000. And we're always looking to go to those Cardinals game and hawk those 50-50 raffles. This continues to be an initiative that is supported by all of our professional teams and is housed in a neutral site. So you may think, well, wait a minute, why isn't this all at Barrow? We wanted to make sure it was at a neutral institution so that everybody's got relationships with different healthcare providers. We all know this. We all know kind of the ground level politics and how that works, but we need to find a neutral body in order to make sure this happens. And this happens because of the networking. So as you heard from Mike's talk, and as you've seen illustrated from this talk, everything about networking is about a relationship. It's about communication. It's identifying the stakeholders. Who does this impact? My advice to you is anytime you come up with an interaction, whether it's an athlete, a parent, a coach, an administrator, ask the first question, which is, how may I help you? Get an understanding of what they're looking for. You assume they come in, they think, okay, well, they want rehab for this, that, and the other. They might just want a better understanding. They also will want some rehabilitation. They want some education. They want somebody to just listen to them. And then you can provide your best advice. Say yes. When it comes to networking, the first thing, of course, is to make a contribution and be sure that you make that contribution. And then, of course, in return, at some point, they are likely to reciprocate. So that is it for me, and I greatly appreciate your time. And I apologize again for the technical difficulties that I caused. So thank you. I think Mike is going to answer all the questions you may have from now on. The first question I have is, where did you find my tie? Because I obviously forgot mine.
Interestingly enough, this might be the most formal dress I've ever worn inside this building. Do you agree, Chip?
You could repeat questions so the audience that's online can hear them.
Okay.
That would be super helpful. I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually have some questions that were submitted prior to this event. So the first one is, what are the classic concussion signs and expected onset for diagnosing if the professional was not present during the event?
Going to defer to Dr. Cardenas for this one.
Sure. So the question was, what are the classic signs of a concussion if the professional was not at the event, essentially, correct? Okay. So everybody is focused on a hit. Everybody is focused on an impact. What is most important is what happens after that impact, okay? Did they pop up immediately? In our video, we saw somebody kind of laid out flat. All right, that's a pretty clear cut, and in fact, we've got that as a no-go sign at the professional level. A post-traumatic seizure without question, gross motor instability. These are things that if you see them, they're done, right? Even if they're transient. We have plenty of people who are knocked out cold. You go out onto the field as an athletic trainer, they're clearly out. They come back and they say, I'm fine. They're not. Please don't even think to bother. But what about some of those more gray issues? Do they get up a little bit wobbly? Do they have any, do they look like they've got a deer in the headlights look? And then you may ask them, well, what was going on at that time? So once that athlete comes off of the field, and you're going to ask this question in the clinic or in your athletic training room afterwards, is tell me exactly what happened, okay? So if they say, well, you know, I was running down the field, and I tell you, this is a perfect example. A guy got hit, and he said, I bit my tongue, and I was spitting blood. So the guy, if you look on video, he gets hit, and he's on his hands and knees, and he's just, of course, everybody's like, oh my gosh, he's clearly got gross motor instability. He's ataxic. That's why he can't get off of his hands and knees. He told us, I bit my tongue and I was spitting blood. Go closer, look closer at the video. Yeah, he bit his tongue, he was spitting blood. He remembers everything about that. If there's a gap in memory, I was running on the field, next thing I know, people are standing around me. You've got your diagnosis. If the next question that you want to ask is, all right, how'd you feel with that impact? Well, my vision went black. Okay, there is your diagnosis. I felt dizzy. I got pissed because he hit me in the ear hole. All right, well, that's different. That's probably not concussed, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that neurological change. So to answer the question, in the athletic training room, you're going to ask those same things. What happened? Tell me don't tell me what other people said. Tell me what you experienced. And then you can ask, oh, other people saw that I walked off to the wrong side of the field, or I ended up, getting belligerent. But you do want to ask their first person point of view, and then also how they felt with that period of time that they were impacted, and then shortly thereafter. Any other online questions?
Well, there's a few more. What other healthcare professionals do you enjoy collaborating most with, and why?
I'll let you start.
Both of you.
All right. Other healthcare professionals. My sports medicine team and perspective is pretty broad. And so some of the individuals that I think I enjoy the most are strength conditioning coaches. I believe that even a head coach or an assistant coach can be part of the sports medicine team as well, particularly in terms of the return to competition or preparing to return to competition portion of rehabilitation. I find sports nutritionalists extremely effective. Providing individuals with information and education about the building blocks that are necessary to recover from things such as concussion, tendinopathies, a variety of different injuries. I think in terms of others, I could go on, but to what Dr. Cardenas spoke about earlier is in working within the network to provide optimization of patient-centered care, I really try to listen and learn from everyone and try to understand their perspective, what their specific discipline is. For example, recently within the last, say, 8 years now, having worked with a number of fellowship trained acupuncturists who are also DCs, particularly within the United States Olympic Committee healthcare network, their perspective on rehabilitation and pain management is very different from the paradigm with which I grew up with. And I'm very thankful for interacting with them and being able to learn from them as well.
So number one for me, of course, is athletic trainers,
Mhm.
because of the room I'm in. No, I'm just kidding. But in all sincerity, all the hard work and effort that goes into being an athletic trainer and being the healthcare provider for all of athletes. I also think that there's been increased recognition for amongst healthcare providers of athletic trainers being another member of the healthcare team, not just somebody who's at the school. Beyond that, my favorite have to be therapists. And the reason they are my favorite is because my role is primarily diagnostic. And yes, I do prescribe medications, but the most effective treatments that I can prescribe are actually therapeutic, which are non-medicine ways that are shown to be incredibly effective at helping my patients get better.
Another one was, what is the biggest no-no in networking and meeting new connections?
The question is, what is the biggest no-no in networking and making new connections? Go ahead.
I'm going to say taking the air out of the room by being the only one talking.
You were real
more
quiet
than you
after
listen.
that. No.
For example, I've had many opportunities to sit down and enjoy meals with Dr. Cardenas at times at maybe the stadium before a game or something. And my objective there is usually to just listen and to talk as little as possible, because I tend to know what I know, and I so desperately want to hear from him. I feel like every time I'm around him, I gain some nugget that allows me to be able to provide a higher level of care, to think more critically about my decision-making processes, to improve my quality of decision-making, et cetera. And so that's my response.
Yeah, the biggest mistake I would say is coming in with an agenda. If indeed you have an agenda coming in, then it's not to say that you can't have perhaps some objectives coming out of the meeting, but don't come in with an agenda, because you really want to make sure that you, with whoever you're networking with and whoever you're collaborating with, that you are also satisfying their objectives and their needs.
Another one is, how do we get in touch with physicians? Is there a go-to person for each hospital?
Question is, how do you get in touch with physicians? Is there a go-to person for each hospital? The answer is call, email, text. And there, of course, in specifically with the Barrow Concussion Network, there's a process, an online process for that. Really, it is asking your fellow athletic trainers, how do I get a hold of so-and-so? Your fellow athletic trainers are going to have those, some of those relationships, or be able to establish those relationships. Some organizations like mine are really lucky to have somebody embedded in the athletic training community, like Lauren. So Lauren can be the point person to basically anybody in our hospital network. And other organizations, other healthcare communities have the same.
I would add to that. I would say that's an example of snowball sampling. We do that in various types of research, particularly qualitative. But snowball sampling, to me, I think is the most effective way to get in touch with physicians. For example, I work under the direction of Dr. Stephen Erickson over at Banner. And one of the primary reasons that I'm there and that helps my network so effectively is because of his athletic training staff, who are so accessible and so available and are able to help me navigate whether or not it needs to be seen by a primary care sports medicine provider. It should go right to ortho. It could go, whichever avenue they see best. So I would agree with that.
How to navigate communication preferences and communication barriers?
Question is how to navigate communication preferences and communication barriers. Communication by far is the most important aspect, and it remains the most challenging. And some of that is simply time. If we use the example of healthcare providers that are in clinic or in surgeries, there are blocks of time in which they will be inaccessible. And so once again, utilizing those resources, those points of care, and then asking the provider, what do you prefer? Email, text? Some people have a strong preferences, others do not.
Yeah, I would agree with that response. One of the very first things that we actually require of our students when they go to a new clinical experience with a preceptor or with a provider is first and foremost on their list of to-dos that day is to ask them, what is your preferred method of communication and how can I get a hold of you in need? Do you prefer text? Do you prefer phone call, email, etc.? So avoid the assumptions and ask, and that helps facilitate that relationship as well. And it could be reciprocated because then that other provider might ask you, well, how do you prefer to be contacted as well? Yeah.
All right, last online question is, why is it so important to have a network of sports medicine professionals outside of your own profession?
So the question is, why is it important to have a sports medicine network even outside of your profession? I hope we've answered that. If we have not, we did a terrible job today.
Agree. Yeah.
There's one more question. What is the greatest piece of advice you wish you had as a young professional in the first few years in the professional sector?
Greatest piece of advice as a young professional getting started.
It's challenging. I'll begin with the best piece of advice I did receive as a young professional. It was from my mentor and teacher, Dr. Jackie Kingma, and it was to not confuse having a life with having a career. I share two things with our students upon graduation, and number one is that. And number two is, as far as it depends on you, don't be the smartest person at your first job. As far as it depends on you, don't be the smartest person at your first job. We all benefit from mentors.
My advice would be to say two things to anybody, and that is, if you don't know, then you say, I do not know. Don't try to make it up. And then follow up with that as, but I will find out. One of the biggest mistakes, especially when you're learning, you're going to get asked questions from parents, families, etc. You're going to have an assumption. They're going to have an assumption that you know more than you do. But until you do, say, I don't know, but I will find out.